The great council chamber filled with worried voices as hundreds of alien beings gathered for the emergency meeting. Ambassador Zethkar walked to the center platform with slow, heavy steps. His blue skin looked pale and sick. His 4 arms shook as he held the datapad that contained the bad news everyone feared to hear. The Valani Federation had always been one of the strongest groups in the galaxy. Their ships were fast, and their weapons were powerful. But now their ambassador looked like a broken creature as he faced the other species representatives. The Korthik swarm has broken through our main defense lines, Zethkar said, in a voice that barely stayed steady. They destroyed 17 star systems in just 1 month. Our combined fleets cannot stop them. The chamber exploded with frightened sounds. Some aliens made high-pitched squeaks, while others created electronic buzzing noises. The Korthik were the stuff of nightmares for every civilized species in the galaxy. They were giant bug-like creatures that came from the dark edge of space, where no one else dared to go. These monsters did not just kill their enemies. They ate everything. They stripped planets of all life and turned it into more soldiers for their endless army. When the Korthik came to a world, nothing remained but empty rock floating in space. Council, Sherman Vixani stood up from his crystal throne. He was tall and made of living crystal that caught the light in beautiful patterns. But today, even his natural beauty could not hide the fear in his voice. "Order, please," he called out. "We must stay calm and think clearly about our options." The noise slowly died down as the different species tried to control their panic. Some of the smaller creatures were already making plans to flee to the far edges of the galaxy. Others talked about surrender and hoped the Korthik might show mercy. "What about the defensive grid around the core worlds?" asked Ambassador Krindle of the hegemony. His snake-like body coiled nervously around his floating platform. "Gone," Zethkar replied with hollow eyes. "The Korthik learned to adapt to our weapons. They consumed the energy shields and used them to make their own ships stronger. Every time we hurt them, they became harder to kill." A small furry creature named Delegate Piptar raised a tiny paw. "Perhaps we should consider evacuation protocols. If we cannot fight them, maybe we can run far enough away." "Run where?" Zethkar's voice became sharp with desperation. "The Korthik move faster than our fastest ships. They hunt like a pack of wild animals. Running only makes them more excited to catch us." Chairman Vexani looked at the star map floating above the chamber. Red dots showed where the Korthik had already destroyed everything. The red area was growing larger every day, moving toward the heart of galactic civilization. "The swarm is moving through the outer rim systems," he said slowly. "If their pattern continues, they will reach the Terran systems within 2 weeks. The humans—" Zethkar's voice carried disbelief and something like disgust. "Chairman, they leave on a Class 12 death world. Their technology is hundreds of years behind ours. We cannot expect primitive savages to do what our advanced civilizations cannot." Many of the other delegates nodded in agreement. Everyone knew about the humans and their strange little blue planet. It was a world so dangerous that most species would die within hours of landing there. The gravity was too strong, the weather was too violent, and the native life forms were incredibly aggressive. The humans themselves were considered interesting but harmless. They had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Their ships were slow, and their weapons were simple. Most species thought of them as friendly pets who were trying very hard to be like the grown-up races. "Still," Chairman Vexani said carefully, "they are in the path of the swarm. We should at least warn them." In the back section of the chamber, a human stood up slowly. Ambassador Jake Murphy was not impressive to look at. He was average height with brown hair and wore a simple blue uniform. Most aliens barely noticed him during council meetings, but something about the way he moved made nearby delegates step back without knowing why. There was a stillness about him that reminded them of dangerous predators from their own holds. "Ambassador Murphy," Chairman Vexani said with surprise, "I did not expect you to speak." Jake walked to the center of the chamber with calm, steady steps. His movements were smooth and controlled like a hunting cat. When he reached the speaking platform, he turned to face the hundreds of alien representatives. Chairman Vexani honored delegates. He began in a quiet voice that somehow carried to every corner of the huge chamber. "The Terran Union has been following the reports about the Korthek swarm." "Of course you have," Zethkar said with barely hidden contempt. "But what can your people possibly do? This is a threat that requires advanced military technology and centuries of tactical experience." Jake's smile was small, but somehow made several delegates feel uncomfortable. "You're right. About one thing, Ambassador. This does require military experience. Humans have been fighting wars for over 10,000 years. We know something about military tactics. Fighting each other with primitive weapons." Zethkar shot back. "The Korthek are not your local tribal enemies. They are a spacefaring species, with biological weapons that can adapt to any defense." "Biological weapons," Jake repeated thoughtfully. "Living ships that can change and grow stronger. That actually sounds like an interesting challenge." A casual way he said it made many aliens exchange worried glances. Either this human had no idea what he was talking about, or he knew something they did not. Chairman Vexani leaned forward in his crystal throne. "Ambassador Murphy, does Earth wish to contribute to the defense effort? We would welcome any support you can provide." Jake looked around the chamber at all the frightened faces. These were some of the most advanced species in the galaxy. They had technology that seemed like magic to most humans. Their ships could travel between stars in days, and their weapons could destroy moons. But they were all terrified of the Korthek swarm. They were ready to run away or surrender rather than fight. Jake thought about his own people back on Earth, humans who had fought through ice ages and plagues and wars that lasted for generations. Humans who had never learned how to give up. The Terran Union accepts full responsibility for stopping the Korthek swarm, he said in the same quiet voice. "We will handle this problem." The chamber fell completely silent. Several delegates looked at each other in confusion. Some thought they had heard him wrong. Others wondered if this was some kind of translation error. "You accept responsibility?" Zethkar's voice was high with shock. "You mean you will try to help us fight them?" "No," Jake replied with that same small smile. "I mean we will stop them. The Korthek swarm is about to learn why you don't threaten peaceful species when humans are around." The silence stretched on as hundreds of alien minds tried to process what they had just heard. This primitive human from a death world was claiming he could solve a problem that had defeated the combined military might of the galaxy. Either he was completely insane, or the galaxy was about to discover something new about the species from the little blue planet called Earth. Admiral Lisa Thompson stood on the bridge of the TUS Retribution and watched the largest human fleet ever assembled move through hyperspace. The main view screen showed hundreds of ships in perfect formation, each one a weapon of war built by a species that had never known true peace. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the kind of calm efficiency that came from generations of conflict. These were not the panicked voices she had heard from the Galactic Council recordings. These were humans preparing for battle, and they moved like they had been born for this moment. "Ma'am, we're receiving updated intelligence from Fleet Command," reported Lieutenant Commander Pete Rodriguez from his station. His fingers danced across the control panel as new data flowed in from scout ships ahead of the main fleet. "Let me hear it, Pete," Admiral Thompson said without taking her eyes off the tactical display. "The Korthek have taken the Balathi system. Complete consumption of all 3 inhabited worlds. Estimated enemy force strength is now at 2 million combat vessels and growing. 2 million. Admiral Thompson repeated the number like she was. Discussing the weather. And how many ships do we have, Commander? 12,000, ma'am. The alien species are calling our mission a suicide run. Admiral Thompson's laugh was cold and sharp. The aliens don't understand something fundamental about humans. Pete, we've been fighting each other for thousands of years. War is not just something we do. War is something we are. She turned to face the communications officer. Send a message to all ship captains. Tell them we're about to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten innocent people within range of Earth's protection. The message went out across the fleet in seconds. On hundreds of ships, human crews received their orders with the same deadly calm their ancestors had shown in battles across history. They were not going to meet the Korthik as victims or as equals. They were going as predators. Captain Kevin Brown of the Taze Devastator appeared on the main screen from his position at the fleet's edge. Behind him, his bridge crew was running final weapons checks with practiced movements. Admiral, my Marines are asking when they get to board enemy vessels, Captain Brown reported with a slight grin. Apparently, sitting in ships and shooting from a distance is too boring for them. Tell Sergeant Collins and her people they'll get their chance, Admiral Thompson replied. But first, we demonstrate why you don't threaten Earth's neighbors. The fleet began to spread into battle formation, each ship moving to its assigned position with lethal purpose. The formation looked almost like a flower blooming in space, but it was designed for one thing only: maximum destruction of enemy forces. In the Marine quarters of the Tusfierce, Sergeant Amy Collins was briefing her squad on Korthik anatomy. The holographic display showed the bug-like creatures in detail, highlighting weak points and vital organs that could be targeted in close combat. Listen up, people, she said to the 30 soldiers sitting in front of her. These bugs have been terrorizing civilized species for cycles. They think they're apex predators because they've never met real resistance. She pointed to different areas on the hologram. They have 17 different weak spots you can hit with a standard combat knife. Their chitin armor is tough, but it has gaps here, and here. Most importantly, they've never fought an enemy that actually fights. Back harder than they do. Private Danny Martinez raised his hand. Sergeant, what if they tried to swarm us in close quarters? Sergeant Collins smiled in a way that would have made the Korthik nervous if they could have seen it. Private, humans invented close quarters combat. We've been perfecting it since we lived in caves. These bugs are about to learn what real predators look like. Meanwhile, in the fleet's command center, Admiral Thompson was studying intelligence reports from the battle zones. The Korthik had a simple but effective strategy. They overwhelmed their enemies with superior numbers and adapted to any weapons used against them. Ma'am, said Intelligence Officer Corinne Miller, we've analyzed their attack patterns. They rely on biological ships that can heal damage and evolve new defenses. Previous engagements show they adapt within hours to any weapon system used against them. Interesting, Admiral Thompson said thoughtfully. So they learn to defend against whatever we throw at them. That's correct now. The Galactic Council forces tried energy weapons, kinetic weapons, and biological weapons. The Korthik adapted to all of them and became stronger. Admiral Thompson nodded slowly. Officer Miller, do we have any records of them facing projectile weapons? Simple chemical explosives? Basic kinetic impact rounds? Corinne checked her data. No, ma'am. All previous encounters used advanced energy-based systems. Why do you ask? Because, Admiral Thompson said with a predatory smile, sometimes the old ways work best. Send a message to all ships. Primary weapons are to be conventional explosives and kinetic rounds. We're going to fight them with weapons their biology can't adapt to. The fleet continued moving toward the battle zone. On every ship, human crews prepared for combat with the kind of thoroughness that had made their species legendary among those who knew their real history. Colonel Danny Wright was addressing his Special Forces team in the cargo bay of the TUS Vengeance. These were the humans who would be dropped onto Korthic vessels to cause maximum damage from the inside. "Remember your training," he told them. "These creatures have been winning because they face opponents who fight fair. We don't fight fair. We fight to win." He gestured to the equipment around them. Conventional explosives, chemical weapons, and good old-fashioned bullets. Nothing fancy, nothing they can adapt to. Just pure human engineering designed to kill things efficiently. The soldiers nodded with the confidence of people who had trained for this their entire lives. They were not afraid of the Korthic. They were excited to finally face an enemy worthy of their skills. On the bridge of the 2 Attribution, Admiral Thompson received a final report from her scouts. The Korthic swarm was ahead of them, a massive cloud of organic ships that stretched across several light years of space. "Ma'am," reported the sensor operator, "we're detecting approximately 2.3 million enemy vessels. They're arranged in a consumption pattern around the Kepler system." 2.3 million, Admiral Thompson repeated. "Pete, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've found the enemy and we're engaging." "What should I tell them about our chances, Mom?" Admiral Thompson looked at the tactical display showing the massive enemy force they were about to face. Any sane military commander would have requested reinforcements or suggested a strategic withdrawal. Instead, she smiled. "Tell them we'll be home for dinner." The human fleet moved into position around the Korthic swarm, like wolves surrounding their prey. The aliens watching from observation posts throughout the galaxy held their breath and waited to see what would happen when the Deathworlders finally met the terror of the Rim. Admiral Thompson stood straight and proud on her bridge. Around her, her crew waited for orders with the calm readiness of born warriors. Behind them, 12,000 human ships prepared to face odds of almost 200 to 1. "All ships," she said into the communication system. "Weapons free. Show them what happens when you threaten our neighbors." The battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity was ready to remind the universe why Earth was classified as a death world. The battle began at the edge of the Kepler system, where the Korthic swarm met the human fleet in the darkness of space. The massive alien force looked like a living storm cloud made of organic ships that pulsed with their own internal light. Korthic had expected another easy victory. They had consumed 17 civilizations without serious resistance. Their bioships were designed to adapt to any weapon and grow stronger with each battle. They had never lost a fight. They were about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. "All ships, weapons free," Admiral Thompson commanded from the bridge of the TUS Retribution. "Show them what happens when you threaten our neighbors." The human fleet opened fire with a precision that stunned the Galactic Council observers watching. From safe distances, every shot was calculated, and every maneuver was planned 3 steps ahead. The Korthic, used to overwhelming enemies through sheer numbers, found themselves facing opponents who seemed to predict their every move. The first wave of Korthic bioships rushed toward the human formation like a living avalanche. They're organic. HULLs rippled with muscle and bone as they prepared to ram the smaller human vessels. This tactic had worked against every other species they had faced. It did not work against humans. Commander Sarah Davis of the TUS Vengeance watched her tactical display with satisfaction as her weapons found their targets. "Focus fire on their neural clusters," she ordered her crew. "Take out their command structure first." The humans had studied every piece of available data on the Korthic. While other species had tried to match them in raw firepower, humans had identified weaknesses, and exploited them with surgical precision. "Ma'am," reported Ensign Chris Taylor from his station, "enemy bioships are trying to adapt to our kinetic rounds. They're growing thicker armor plating." "Let them," Commander Davis replied calmly. "Switch to high explosive rounds. Let's see them adapt to having their insides blown out." A human strategy was working exactly as planned. The Korthic bioships began to develop defenses against kinetic weapons, but this made them vulnerable to explosives. When they adapted to explosives, the humans switched to chemical weapons. When they adapted to chemicals, the humans went back to kinetics. "They can't adapt to everything at once," Admiral Thompson explained to her tactical officer. "Every adaptation they make creates a new weakness. We just keep changing our approach faster than they can evolve." On the TOS Devastator, Captain Kevin Brown watched with professional appreciation as his crew systematically destroyed Korthic vessels. The enemy ships were impressive and terrifying, but they fought with the mindless aggression of animals. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, his weapons officer reported. "Large bioship approaching for ramming attack." "Let it come," Captain Brown said calmly. "Wait until it's committed to the attack run, then hit it with everything we have." The massive Korthic vessel rushed toward the human ship like a living spear. Its organic hull was covered in bone spikes and acid-dripping weapons. It was designed to inspire terror in its enemies, but it was about to learn that humans did not scare easily. Now, Captain Brown commanded the TOS Devastator, unleashed a concentrated barrage of conventional weapons that tore through the bioship's hull like paper. The alien vessel, built to adapt to energy weapons, had no defense against simple chemical explosives and metal projectiles. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "the Korthic are trying to board the TUS Fierce. Captain Johnson is requesting permission to let them." Admiral Thompson's voice came over the fleet communication system. "Permission granted. I want the galaxy to see what happens when you board a human vessel." On the TUS Fierce, Captain Tony Johnson smiled grimly as Korthic boarding pods attached to his ship's hull. In the corridors, his crew waited with weapons ready. The Korthic had made their first fatal mistake. They had brought a boarding action to a species that had perfected close-quarters combat. The alien warriors cut through the hull with biological acid and poured into the human ship. They were 3 meters tall with razor-sharp claws and chitinous armor that could deflect most energy weapons. They had never lost a boarding action. They had never boarded a human ship. Sergeant Amy Collins met the first wave of Korthic warriors in Corridor 7 with her squad of 30 Marines. The aliens expected to face terrified defenders who would flee from their superior size and natural weapons. Instead, they found humans who fought with a controlled savagery that made their own seem civilized. "Remember your training, Sergeant," Collins shouted as she emptied her rifle into the lead Korthic warrior. "Aim for the joints in their armor. Use your knives when you run out of bullets." The battle in the corridors was brutal and fast. The Korthic had natural weapons and armor, but the humans had something more important. They had experience fighting in confined spaces and the determination of a species that had never learned to surrender. Private Danny Martinez found himself face to face with a Korthic warrior twice his size. The alien creature's claws could have cut him in half, but it had never fought an enemy that used tactics instead of just strength. Danny rolled under the creature's swipe and came up with his combat knife, driving it into the gap between armor plates at the alien's neck. The Korthic fell with a sound like breaking glass. "That's for threatening innocent people," Danny said as he moved to help his squadmates. Within 20 minutes, the boarding parties were eliminated. The Korthic had discovered that humans were not the weak prey they had expected. They were predators who had been hiding among the peaceful species of the galaxy. "This is Sergeant Collins to Fleet Command," came her voice over the communication system. We've cleared the boarding parties and secured their entry pods. Turns out they don't expect anyone to fight back once they're inside their ships. Amateur mistake. But the humans were not finished. They had learned something important about Korthak vessels during the boarding action. The organic ships were vulnerable from the inside, where their natural defenses could not protect them. All Marines, prepare for reverse boarding actions. Admiral Thompson ordered. We're going to use their own pods to visit their ships. The Korthak watched in horror as human soldiers began using the alien boarding pods to attack their vessels from within. The bioships had no defenses against enemies who were already inside their hulls. Captain Rachel Green of the 2C Defender led a boarding party onto a Korthak command vessel. The interior was like something from a nightmare, with walls that pulsed, like living tissue and floors that were warm to the touch. Spread out and find their control center, she ordered her Marines. Plant explosives on anything that looks important. The Korthak warriors inside their own ship were at a severe disadvantage. They had never practiced defending their vessels from internal attack. Their weapons were designed for space combat, not corridor fighting. The humans moved through the organic ship like a virus, destroying critical systems and eliminating resistance with ruthless efficiency. Within an hour, the massive bioship was drifting helplessly in space. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Commander Alex Stone, "we're receiving surrender signals from multiple Korthak vessels. They're trying to withdraw from the battle." Admiral Thompson looked at the tactical display. In less than 6 hours, the human fleet had destroyed over 50,000 Korthak ships while losing only 2 of their own. The mathematics of warfare had shifted dramatically. "Negative on the withdrawal," she said firmly. "They started this fight. We're going to finish it." The battle continued as the Korthak swarm learned what it meant to face a species that had turned war into an art form. Every advantage they had relied on was being systematically destroyed by humans who refused to fight fair. For the first time in their species' history, the Korthak were learning what it felt like to be prey. By the 3rd day of battle, the Korthak swarm was in full retreat for the first time in their species' history. A massive alien force that had terrorized the galaxy was running from a much smaller human fleet like frightened animals. Admiral Thompson stood in the war room of the Tosh Retribution, studying the tactical displays with her senior staff. The numbers told a story that would have been impossible to believe just days before. The human fleet had lost only 4 vessels while destroying over 300,000 Korthak ships. "Ma'am," reported Intelligence Officer Karan Miller, "we're intercepting Korthak communications across all frequencies. They're calling us the Deathbringers and warning other swarms to avoid human space." "Deathbringers," Admiral Thompson repeated with a cold smile. "I like that. What else are they saying?" "They're describing human combat tactics as unnatural and against the order of things. Apparently, they've never encountered a species that fights with such coordination and planning." Colonel Danny Wright, who had been leading boarding actions against Korthak vessels, looked up from his own reports. "Ma'am, we've learned something interesting from the prisoners we've taken. The Korthak have a rigid hierarchy based on physical strength. They don't understand tactical thinking or strategic planning." "Explain," Admiral Thompson said. "They've been winning battles by being bigger, stronger, and more numerous than their enemies. They've never faced opponents who use intelligence instead of just brute force. When we started outthinking them, their entire command structure collapsed." The colonel brought up a holographic display showing the internal structure of a Korthak bioship. "Their vessels are grown, not built. They can adapt to different weapons, but they can't change their basic design. Once we figured out how to exploit their structural weaknesses, they became sitting ducks." Captain Sarah Davis joined the discussion. From her position at the communications console, "Admiral, we're receiving reports from across the battle zone. The Korthak are abandoning their forward positions and retreating toward their home territories. "How many ships are left in their main force?" Admiral Thompson asked. "Approximately 1.7 million vessels, ma'am. They're maintaining formation, but moving away from our positions at maximum speed." Admiral Thompson nodded thoughtfully. The smart move would be to let them go and claim victory. The human fleet had already accomplished more than anyone thought possible. They had stopped the unstoppable Korthic swarm and saved the galaxy from consumption. But Admiral Thompson was not thinking about smart moves. She was thinking about the 17 civilizations that had been destroyed before humans got involved. She was thinking about the billions of innocent lives that had been lost because no one had been willing to fight hard enough to stop the Korthic. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said to her communications officer, "send a message to the Korthic command vessel. Priority transmission." The message was broadcast across space on frequencies that would reach every Korthic ship in the retreating swarm. Admiral Thompson's image appeared on screens throughout the alien fleet, her expression calm, but her eyes promising violence. "I am Admiral Thompson of the Terran Union," she began in a voice that was quiet but carried absolute authority. "You have threatened our allies and disturbed the peace of this galaxy. You have consumed innocent civilizations and spread terror across known space." She paused to let her words sink in. "You have two choices. Retreat to your home systems and never return to civilized space, or we will hunt down every last one of you. Choose wisely." The response came within hours. The Korthic swarm, for the first time in their species' existence, sent a formal surrender transmission. "We yield to the Deathbringers," came the alien message. "We will return to the dark. Space is in trouble, the Light Dwellers no more." But Admiral Thompson was not satisfied with just words. She had seen too many wars end with empty promises that were broken as soon as the enemy felt strong enough to fight again. "Colonel Wright," she said, "prepare boarding parties for the Korthic command vessels. We're going to make sure they understand exactly what surrender means." Colonel Wright led the boarding party onto the massive Korthic command bioship. The structure was 3 kilometers long and covered in organic armor that pulsed with its own heartbeat. It was designed to be intimidating, but the colonel had seen worse things in human war zones. The interior was like walking through the belly of some massive beast. The walls were made of living tissue that was warm to the touch. Strange lights pulsed along what might have been nerve pathways. The air smelled of copper and decay. "Stay alert," Colonel Wright told his soldiers. "Just because they surrendered doesn't mean they won't try something stupid." They found the command center in the heart of the ship, a vast chamber filled with organic control systems and pools of bioluminescent fluid. The Korthic command staff was waiting for them, their insect-like bodies hunched in postures of submission. The Korthic commander was enormous, even by their standards, standing over 4 meters tall with armor that looked like it had been forged from black steel. Its compound eyes reflected the strange lights of the command center as it looked down at the humans. "You are the Deathbringers," it said in a voice like grinding stone. "We have heard the warnings from our scattered forces. We are Colonel Wright and his Marines," the colonel replied calmly. "We're here to discuss the terms of your surrender." The Korthic commander's head tilted in what might have been confusion. "Terms? We have yielded. Is this not sufficient?" "No," Colonel Wright said simply. "Surrender means you follow our rules now. You don't get to just go home and pretend this never happened." He gestured to his soldiers, who began setting up equipment around the command center. "You're going to send a message to every Korthic swarm in the galaxy. You're going to tell them what happens when they threaten species under human protection." The alien commander's natural weapons twitched nervously. "And if we refuse?" Colonel Wright's smile was cold enough to freeze water. "Then we demonstrate why you don't want to refuse." The message went out within hours. Across the galaxy, Korthik swarms received the transmission from their defeated command structure. The images showed the aftermath of the battle, with hundreds of thousands of destroyed bioships floating in space like dead insects. "We are the Korthik," the message began. "We have ruled the dark spaces for 1,000 cycles. We have consumed 17 civilizations without defeat. We are the terror of the Rim." The transmission showed the Korthik commander, its massive form somehow diminished as it spoke. "We have met the Deathbringers from the world called Earth. They fight with weapons we cannot adapt to and tactics we cannot understand. They board our ships and kill our warriors in their own territory." The images shifted to show human marines, moving through Korthik vessels like avenging spirits. "They do not fear us. They do not flee from us. They hunt us like we have hunted others." The message ended with a simple warning: do not go to the light dweller spaces. Do not threaten the species under human protection. The Deathbringers are watching, and they do not forget. Throughout the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The Korthik swarm, terror of the Rim worlds, had been defeated by a species most civilizations considered primitive. The humans had not just won. They had made it look easy. On the bridge of the TUS Retribution, Admiral Thompson watched the retreating Korthik fleet disappear into hyperspace. The battle was over, but she knew the real work was just beginning. The galaxy had learned that Earth was not just another peaceful world. It was home to a species that would fight to protect others with a ferocity that made the Korthik look tame by comparison. And that was exactly the message Admiral Thompson wanted to send. 3 months after the defeat of the Korthik swarm, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. The Great Chamber was packed with representatives from every known species, all of them focused on the small human delegation sitting calmly. In the center of the room, the atmosphere was different from the last meeting. Where before there had been panic and desperation, now there was a nervous tension that came from dealing with a species that had proven to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Ambassador Jake Murphy stood to address the assembly, his manner as relaxed as if he was discussing the weather. Beside him sat Admiral Thompson, her uniform now bearing new decorations from grateful species across the galaxy. The rest of the human delegation was small, but somehow seemed to fill more, spaced in groups twice their size. The Terran Union thanks the Council for this opportunity to address recent events. Murphy began in the same quiet voice that had first shocked the Assembly months earlier. "We understand there have been some concerns about human military capabilities." Chairman Vixani leaned forward on his crystal throne. His natural glow seemed dimmer than usual, as if the stress of recent events had affected even his alien physiology. "Ambassador Murphy, your species has fundamentally altered the balance of power in this galaxy. The Korthik swarm had not been defeated in over 1,000 cycles. How do we know you won't turn your weapons on peaceful species?" Murphy's smile was gentle, but somehow reminded everyone present of a predator showing its teeth. "Because, Mr. Chairman, we didn't fight the Korthik for conquest or glory. We fought them because they were threatening people who couldn't defend themselves. That's what humans do." "But your military power," interrupted Ambassador Zethkar, his blue skin still pale from the shock of seeing his people's greatest fear defeated so easily. "Your species possesses weapons and tactics that we cannot counter. How can we trust that you will not use them against us?" Admiral Thompson spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. "Ambassador, with respect, you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether we can hurt you. The question is whether you're planning to hurt anyone else." Her words sent a chill through the chamber. The implication was clear. As long as species behaved themselves, they had nothing to fear from humanity. But those who chose to threaten others would face the same fate as the Korthik. From the observation deck overlooking the main floor, Captain Rachel Green of the TUS Defender watched the proceedings with her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Alex Stone. The human fleet remained stationed throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as guardians. "Think they'll ever stop being afraid of us?" Stone asked quietly, watching the nervous movements of the alien delegates below. "Probably not," Green replied. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Fear of humans might be the only thing that keeps the peace out here." Down on the main floor, Delegate Piptar of the Furry Coalition raised a small paw. "Ambassador Murphy, what assurance do we have that your people will not demand tribute or territorial concessions in exchange for protection?" "We don't want your territory," Murphy replied simply. "Earth has everything we need. We don't want your resources because we can make our own. We certainly don't want to rule over you because, frankly, that sounds like more trouble than it's worth." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the chamber. The idea that a species might not want to dominate others was foreign to many of the assembled delegates. "Then what do you want?" asked Ambassador Crinville, his snake-like body coiled tightly around his platform. Murphy was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "We want to live in a galaxy where peaceful species can go about their lives without fear. We want to know that when we explore new worlds, we won't find the remains of civilizations that were wiped out by predators." He gestured to Admiral Thompson. "We want to never again have to send our sons and daughters to fight battles that could have been prevented if someone had stood up to bullies earlier." Chairman Vexani's crystal form flickered with what might have been emotion. "And you believe your species is capable of maintaining such peace?" "We know we're capable of fighting to protect it," Admiral Thompson said firmly. "Whether that's enough remains to be seen." The debate continued for hours as various species voiced their concerns and proposals. Some wanted formal treaties that would limit human military actions. Others suggested tribute payments to ensure continued protection. A few brave delegates even proposed that humans should be given official authority over galactic security. Finally, Chairman Vexani called for order. "The Council will now vote on Resolution 847B, which would establish the Terran Protection Protocols." The resolution was unlike anything in galactic history. It formally acknowledged that humanity would respond to threats against peaceful species anywhere in known space. It gave human forces the authority to act without Council approval when facing imminent threats to civilian populations. Most importantly, it established that any species that committed acts of aggression against peaceful civilizations would face the full military might of the Terran Union. The vote was unanimous. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways that no one had expected. Species that had been bitter enemies for centuries suddenly found themselves cooperating rather than risk attracting human attention. Pirates and raiders discovered that their traditional hunting grounds were now patrolled by ships from Earth. Hegemony, which had been planning to invade the Centauri Collective, quietly canceled their military buildup. The Ravagers, a species of nomadic warriors, sent a formal apology to the Council for past actions and promised to find peaceful work. Reports came in from across the galaxy of conflicts, ending not through negotiation or surrender, but because both sides were afraid of what might happen if humans got involved. Captain Kevin Brown of the Toes Devastator found himself stationed in the former Korthek territories, helping to establish monitoring stations that would watch for any signs of the swarm's return. The work was peaceful but important. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving a distress call from the Alteran system. Pirates are attacking a merchant convoy." "Set course for Alteran," Captain Brown ordered. "Maximum speed." The Toes Devastator arrived at the NC battle zone to find 3 pirate vessels surrounding a group of unarmed cargo ships. The pirates were from the Skull Fleet, a group known for their cruelty and their practice of selling captured crews into slavery. "This is Captain Brown of the Terran Union ship Devastator," he broadcast on all frequencies. You have 30 seconds to release your prisoners and surrender. The pirate leader's response was full of curses and threats. He claimed that no single human ship could defeat his entire squadron. He boasted about the weapons his vessels carried and the battles they had won. 20-9 seconds later, all 3 pirate ships were floating debris. The rescue operation took less than an hour. The merchant crews were freed, their cargo was returned, and the surviving pirates were handed over to local authorities. It was the kind of routine patrol action that was becoming common throughout human-protected space, but the real impact was in the message it sent. Word of the incident spread through pirate networks across the galaxy. The Skull Fleet had been one of the most feared raider groups in known space. They had been destroyed by a single human ship without even putting up a real fight. Within weeks, piracy in the sector dropped by 90%. On Earth, Admiral Thompson stood in the Global Defense Command Center, watching status reports from home. And fleets stationed throughout the galaxy. The screen showed a map of known space with green dots marking the positions of Terran Union vessels. "Ma'am," reported Colonel Wright from his position at the Strategic Planning Station, "we've received formal requests for protection from 47 different species in the past month. Most of them are offering to pay tribute in exchange for security guarantees." "Standard response," Admiral Thompson said without looking up from her reports. "We don't want their money. We want their word that they'll treat their neighbors with respect." "Yes, ma'am." "We're also getting reports of species upgrading their defensive capabilities. Apparently, everyone wants to be able to help if we need backup." Admiral Thompson smiled at that. "Good. The best defense is when everyone is willing to defend everyone else." She turned to face the main display showing the galactic map. "What's the status on the deep space monitoring stations?" "All systems operational, ma'am. We've got early warning networks established in every major hyperspace route. If anything like the Korthik shows up again, we'll know about it long before they reach populated systems." "And the diplomatic situation?" "Stable, ma'am. The Galactic Council has been surprisingly cooperative. They seem to understand that having humans around is better than facing the next crisis alone." Admiral Thompson nodded with satisfaction. The galaxy was not perfect, but it was peaceful in a way it had never been before. Species that had spent centuries fighting each other were now working together rather than risk human intervention. More importantly, the smaller and weaker civilizations no longer lived in constant fear of stronger neighbors. They knew that somewhere out there, human ships were watching and waiting to respond to any threat against innocent people. "Ma'am," said a new voice from the communication station, "we're receiving a priority message from the frontier sectors. Long-range sensors have detected an unknown fleet approaching from outside the galaxy." Admiral Thompson's expression became serious. "Size and composition?" "Unknown, ma'am, but they're big. Estimated arrival in human space, 6 months." "Admiral." Thompson looked at the galactic map with its scattered green dots representing human ships. 12,000 vessels protecting billions of people across hundreds of star systems. It seemed like a lot until you considered the vastness of space and the number of potential threats. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," she ordered. "Begin preparation for possible large-scale engagement. And send a diplomatic message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we may need their help this time." She paused and smiled grimly. "Also, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're going to need more ships. A lot more ships." The galaxy had learned that humans were willing to fight to protect others. Now it was about to learn that humans were also willing to teach others how to fight for themselves. The age of human protection was evolving into something even more powerful. The age of galactic unity under human leadership. And in the depths of space, unknown ships continued their approach toward a galaxy that was no longer helpless, no longer divided, and no longer afraid to fight back against those who would threaten the innocent. The Deathworlders had come with firepower, and they had stayed, to ensure that never again would peaceful species face extinction alone.